Okay, I'm with Ingrid Irwin. She's a lawyer from Ballarat in her own practice and also a survivor. Ingrid's been advocating for survivors for many years through the Royal Commission, and we're outside the Supreme Court after the final day's appeal evidence in regard to the conviction of Cardinal Pell.
That's right.
So, Ingrid, what's your take on the appeal?
Well, look, I think it just shows the disgraceful performance of the police and the prosecution service of Victoria. We've got a classic case here that is a case in point. It basically shows what happens when you're a survivor and you're brave and you come forward and tell the police, this is the outcome. This is the standard trajectory. We've got a 1% conviction rate. Victims don't have their own lawyer. No one represents them in the courtroom, and they can't represent themselves. What you have is a lazy, inefficient government body that they only care about pressing charges. They don't care about isolated survivors and their stories and what justice means for them. So there's no one working hard there. Whereas on the side for Pell, you can see a brilliant legal team that care about the reputation of the instructing solicitors firm, Galbaleys. They're doing a wonderful job. They brief the best of counsel. They have arguments on the ready, paralegals on the ready, folders on the ready, tabs on the ready, the right arguments in the right places, the right sections. The prosecution was sloppy. You know, they don't know what to say. It almost looked like they didn't even do their homework. They just stood up and just started waffling. There was no real logic to their arguments. There was no sequential sort of thought, no coherent sort of speech patterns or anything. It was just dog's breakfast, I'd describe it as. So this is the arm of justice for victims when you want to go through the criminal justice system. So this is a huge warning for survivors out there that, you know, your truth doesn't matter. This is how it computes. After all the lawyers have dissected it and attacked it and there's no one there for you, there's nothing left other than, you know, precise legal arguments put by the defendant. So I'm very concerned. I'm a lawyer, but I want to be a lawyer in there. I want to be a lawyer for victims where it matters, and that's the criminal justice system. Because if the Supreme Court is not the forum, if the county court isn't the forum, if the magistrates court isn't the forum, where is the forum for victims of sexual assault? So last time I checked, the Crimes Act says that sexual assault and rape and indecent assault of a minor, all those things are crimes. Now the problem is that in this state and in this country, crimes are against the state. They're not actually seen as against the person. But I can vouch for the fact that the state wasn't raped when I was raped. I was raped, my body. The sanctity of my body was taken. So I'm the rape victim, not the state. But what we've got is this patriarchal state that says we here are prosecuting against the alleged defendant. But the thing is that the victim in there is the victim. It's not the state. The state isn't really the victim. So that's why we need to isolate and separate out each individual complainant in a police case, give them their own separate lawyers so that the police are there in their independent right as an independent investigator of a crime. Then you have the independent lawyers for each independent victim. There might be multiple victims all alleging a crime against one person, like in the case of Pell. And so each of them has their own lawyer that can put arguments in relation to their client, just like the defendant has their lawyer. It would not upset the apple cart or the way that, you know, justice is delivered for the defendant, but finally it would change the way justice is delivered for victims. And let's just not lose sight of the fact that this whole case is there because victims went forward. You know, defendants don't come forward and say, hey, I reckon someone's going to allege something about me in the future. The whole thing is we've got brave survivors that go to the police and end up, a small percentage of cases, maybe 3% of cases, end up having a trial and having an appeal like this. So what happens to the 99% of people that come forward and are brave and tell the police? Nothing. They end up on the dustbin of cases. And this is what I'm worried about is going to happen in this case. I think the appeal is going to be successful, and it will be a question of whether or not the OPP decide to appeal their Honour's decision in this case, which we're waiting for now. They've reserved their decision. But I don't think the state's going to do it because it's going to be at huge cost. So I think this is, and again, another sad tale, but this is the reality of criminal law. This is the reality of victims coming forward. So all of that spin from the Royal Commission about we care about your historic abuse, all of that stuff about, we've got specially trained police to deal with your crime, we've got special socket units. All of that means jack shit, I'm sorry to say, because if this actually is what it looks like to be brave, who would want to be brave? Tell your counsellor and deal with your abuse. Yes, absolutely. I had to become a client. I went back to CASA. I did all the work. It's hard work to be a survivor and survive, But to tell any client or prospective client to go to the police, I would never dream of it. I just wouldn't. Not until victims have a lawyer of their own.
Just for a moment.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fine. No, go for it. Just to make any changes or tell me to repeat it. So I could say this 1,000 times.
The other thing too, just for being helpful for the edit.
Yep.
So Ingrid, one of the big issues that we're talking about is making sure that for adult victims, when they go to the police and go through the criminal justice system, they have their own lawyer.
Oh, absolutely. That's the essential ingredient that's missing. That's why we have a 1% conviction rate. If they had their own lawyer, then that lawyer can act on those instructions of that particular complainant. There currently is a conflict of interest between police and victims. And this is seen where police can't help a victim with their police statement, like as in giving them advice on it and what to put in it. They can't help them with pretext calls and advice on how to make a pretext call or what to ask the person to catch them off guard. They can't help them with that. The police have to, by their own admissions, remain independent of the complainants. They can't be seen to be helping them with their evidence. That's quite correct. That's quite correct. And that points to and adds to my argument that victims need their own lawyer. And that way there wouldn't be a conflict of interest. So the very real problem we've got is that currently the police pretend to society that they're there for victims, that they care about victims. Now, this is really, really misleading. And this is a problem. We just had the OPP commission a report done on victims and what they feel about the OPP, okay? And it just came out in the news a couple of weeks ago. Now, what happened is the OPP provided to the Centre for Innovative Justice, provided them with 18 victims and what they felt about the OPP, and have conducted a study based on a sample of 18 victims that they actually selected and provided to the Centre of Innovative Justice. Now, how can you have a survey that skews the results like that or makes any conclusions based on what just 18 people say? You would surely want your sample to be the thousands of people that go through the prosecution service every year, or I don't know, base it on the last 3 years. Why select 18 people and what they think? Naturally, they've cherry-picked because they want a certain response, because they want to give themselves a pat on the back that they're doing all right. Because the great conclusion of that report just a couple of weeks ago was that victims, wait for it, are generally happy with the OPP and the service they provide. All that victims would really like is for them just to communicate a bit more and let them know what's happening, and that would help them feel really good when their case doesn't work. Now, I'm sorry, that is poppycock. That is not how victims feel. And I wonder to myself whether or not in that study, victims actually realised that the justice system could be quite different. They could have their own lawyer. So maybe they just asked questions that are already skewed. Maybe the question said, based on the fact that you can't have a lawyer and at least you have a prosecution service, yada, yada, yada. I mean, I don't know, but I'd like to see those questions to really analyse the results, because what we've got is, the political spin sort of done by the government bodies that are meant to be there to regulate and keep on track the OPP, which is such as the Centre for Innovative Justice. It's basically established because it acknowledges the fact that there is no justice there for victims 99% of the time. So another thing that the legal intelligentsia have done is they've basically said, look, victims of sex assault, we've got this thing called restorative justice. We think that's best for you because we acknowledge that you really do get stuck at, the criminal justice system and you don't get justice. We sort of know you're telling the truth, but, we have a legal system and we have barristers that we need to keep feathering their nest. So we're going to keep the illusion alive, but what we're going to do is sidetrack some of you that are really in the know, and we're going to recommend this thing called restorative justice, which is sort of like truth-telling in a group session where there's acknowledgement of the truth in the victim, and the victim is centre stage finally, right? Because the criminal justice system never is about the truth or the victim. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to set up a side branch thing called restorative justice. Now, the problem with that is that I can't really think of many victims where the defendant is going to agree to the allegations, even if there isn't a criminal justice system hanging over their head. I mean, do they want to be shamed by the family? They're still going to be in that position where they're going to try and get traction saying they never did it. So I don't know even why people would be setting out to bypass the criminal justice system. Why instead don't they fix the criminal justice system and acknowledge where the problem is, which is give the victim legal standing, give them a right to a lawyer, and let them actually be part of that legal case. Surely a victim has a right, a human right, at a time of Me Too, at a time of royal commissions, time of transparency in, financial institutions, religious institutions, disability services everywhere. But no, we're going to keep lawyers and the law as this private little bastion over here. Well, no, I'm here to tell you I don't want to be a lawyer in the legal system until I can be a lawyer in that courtroom where for sex assault, that's where I should be. The law and the government should not be able to flick a switch off and on as to when I can represent a client. So, for example, I represented clients in the Royal Commission, and the law says that's okay. The Attorney General's Department says, Ingrid, here's a big fat cheque for all the work you did in the Royal Commission. So I represented clients. But the minute that they go into the criminal justice system, those very clients, about the exact same allegations against the exact same perpetrators, I can't represent them. No, I'm not allowed to, because they don't have a right to a lawyer, because there are nobody in the criminal case that's actually, ironically, all about them. But then the law flicks a switch on again for me and says, but if they want to do a VOCAT application, victims of crime, you can be their lawyer again for that. That's okay. You can fill out the paperwork and, put all the documents together, all the receipts, and government will refund you for that, That's fine. And we'll pay you too, Ingrid. We'll pay you. But what is this? And then if my victims are rare enough to have some money to pay me to start a civil suit where we sue the perpetrator, that's okay, Ingrid, you can be their lawyer again for that. What I'm saying is, instead of having all of these different forums for where a lawyer can or can't, why don't we just say justice belongs in the criminal justice system, put all of the compensation for them via the Sentencing Act, it's all available through the criminal justice system. Everything should be the criminal justice system. The acknowledgement should come from that, compensation could come from that, and truth-telling should come through that. And that's the problem. It's because the criminal justice system isn't working for victims that the government says, that's okay, we won't fix that. Instead, what we'll do is we'll set up restorative justice, we'll set up Toward Healing, we'll set up Kiora for the Anglicans, we'll set up the redress scheme, we'll do a great big national apology, we'll keep spending all this money over here, and VOCAT, we'll have a tribunal that doesn't work anyway, wouldn't even give interim awards to my clergy abuse clients. We'll do all of these things over here, but we won't address this, because this is where all these learned barristers are making a whole lot of money, saying, aren't I brilliant? The Robert Richters of the world. He is good. I wouldn't say he's brilliant, because the only thing he's missing is an adversary. He needs Jack Rush QC, briefed by a victim, against him. And then we'll see a legal fight that's worth watching. But, if it's a 1% conviction rate, I don't even want to be in the courtroom. It's embarrassing. Let's have a fair fight. It's like watching a game of footy and, one team's getting thrashed. You see crowds leave. They leave the stadium because it's actually not about the thrill of the game. It's just like a walkover. It's ugly. Well, that's how I feel as a lawyer. Every single time a case of sex assault runs in these courts, that's how I feel. I already know it's not going to work 99% of the time. So what is there to see? What, some people strutting around like, peacocks in their gowns and their wigs? I mean, I don't even know what all that is for, If the courts don't work for victims of sex assault, but they work for victims of murder, but the victim's dead, I don't understand. For surviving victims, what is the criminal justice system there for? And that's why when a woman is killed pretty much every Friday night or once a week in Australia, and we have a vigil because they've died, what I mean, the irony of that, we have marches of hundreds of thousands of people for Jill Meagher down the street, which is great. I agree, it's just abhorrent. But what I'm saying is, why aren't they seeing that is the